On a moonless night in a crumbling suburb, a ragged young man moves through car wrecks, a German shepherd leading the way. At the corner of a collapsed warehouse, a piercing scream shatters the silence. Without hesitation, the dog rushes toward. The sound, the young man close behind. 2 minutes later, the dog lies sprawled on the asphalt, chest pierced by a rusty knife. Among cans and concrete, a baby emerges, crawls to the body and embraces it. A flash bursts from their contact. And, for a second, everything stopped. Love stories with animals. Then subscribe now and never miss one. Thanks for following us. Now, back to our story. In the outskirts of Detroit, where abandoned factories stood like ancient ruins against the gray sky, 22-year-old Ethan Miller had learned to navigate a world that seemed to have forgotten kindness. The once thriving industrial hub had become a shadow of its former self, with entire neighborhoods surrendering to decay and neglect. Ethan had grown up in this harsh reality, where survival often meant keeping to himself and trusting no one. Economic collapse had hit Riverside, his neighborhood, particularly hard. Families had moved away, businesses had shut down, and those who remained seemed to wear their desperation like a second skin. Ethan lived in a modest apartment in a building that had seen better days, with peeling paint on the walls and water stains on the ceiling. The heating worked sporadically and the pipes groaned like wounded animals during the bitter Michigan winters. Yet amid this desolation, Ethan had found one unwavering source of comfort, his loyal German shepherd, Atlas. The dog had been a gift from his grandmother 4 years ago, shortly before she had succumbed to illness, leaving Ethan truly alone in the world. Atlas, with his intelligent eyes and protective instinct, had become Ethan's anchor in a sea of indifference. "It's just you and me against the world, buddy," Ethan would often tell Atlas as they walked through the deserted streets of their neighborhood. The dog would respond with a soft whine, as if understanding the weight of Ethan's words. Ethan worked at a local mechanic shop, one of the few businesses that had survived the economic downturn. The pay was minimal, but it covered the rent and put food on the table. Most importantly, Mr. Jenkins, the shop owner, allowed Ethan to bring Atlas to work. The dog would lie quietly in a corner of the garage, watching Ethan work on engines and transmissions with skilled hands that belied his young age. "That dog of yours is better behaved than most people I know," Mr. Jenkins would say occasionally, slipping Atlas a treat when he thought Ethan wasn't looking. Ethan's life followed a predictable routine: work, home, occasional grocery runs, and long walks with Atlas. The German shepherd was not just a pet. He was a confidant, a protector, and sometimes Ethan's only reason to get out of bed in the morning. When the weight of loneliness became too heavy to bear, Atlas would rest his head on Ethan's lap, his warm presence a reminder that Ethan was not completely alone. Their evening walks were a sacred ritual. They would explore the abandoned sectors of the city, where nature had begun to reclaim what humans had left behind. Wildflowers pushed through cracks in the concrete, and vines climbed the walls of forgotten buildings. There was a strange beauty in the reclamation, a testament to nature's resilience in the face of human neglect. On a particularly cold November evening, as the first snow of the season began to fall, Ethan and Atlas ventured into an area they rarely visited. The old Parkside district had once been a vibrant community with family-owned businesses and well-maintained parks. Now, it stood as a ghost town with boarded-up storefronts and empty playgrounds. "What do you think, Atlas? Should we explore?" "A bit," Ethan asked, his breath forming small clouds in the cold air. Atlas wagged his tail in response, always eager for new adventures. As they walked deeper into the abandoned district, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Atlas seemed to sense it too, his ears perked up and his body alert. The snow was falling more heavily now, creating a white blanket that muffled their footsteps. They passed by an old community center, its windows broken and its walls covered in graffiti. Ethan paused, drawn to a faded mural on one of the exterior walls. It depicted children playing in a garden, surrounded by animals and vibrant flowers. The scene was a stark contrast to the desolation that now surrounded it. "Remember when this place used to host summer festivals?" Ethan murmured to Atlas, recalling distant childhood memories of music, laughter, and the smell of barbecue. It seemed like a lifetime ago. As they continued their walk, Atlas suddenly stopped, his body tense. A low growl rumbled in his throat, and Ethan immediately became alert. Atlas was not aggressive by nature. If he was growling, there was a reason. "What is it, boy?" Ethan whispered, scanning their surroundings. The snow had picked up, reducing visibility, but Ethan could make out a shape moving in the distance. It was a person, hunched against the cold, moving quickly between the abandoned buildings. Curiosity got the better of Ethan. In a neighborhood where most people kept to themselves, any unusual behavior warranted attention. With Atlas by his side, he cautiously followed the figure, maintaining a safe distance. The mysterious person led them to an old warehouse, one of many that had been abandoned when the manufacturing companies had moved overseas. The building's facade was imposing, with broken windows that resembled dark, empty eyes staring out at a world that had moved on without it. The figure disappeared through a side entrance, and Ethan hesitated. This was beyond their usual exploration. Atlas, however, seemed determined to investigate, pulling on his leash with unusual insistence. "All right, but we're just going to take a quick look," Ethan conceded, his curiosity mingling with caution. The warehouse interior was vast and cold, with high ceilings that disappeared into shadows. The snow fell through the broken skylights, creating small white mounds on the concrete floor. The space echoed with the sound of their footsteps and the distant drip of water from leaking pipes. Atlas led Ethan deeper into the warehouse, his nose to the ground, following a scent that only he could detect. They navigated through abandoned machinery and empty storage units until they reached a secluded corner where the mysterious figure had disappeared. What they found was unexpected. A makeshift shelter constructed from discarded materials. Cardboard, boxes, old tarps, and broken furniture had been arranged to create a small enclosed space. The shelter was occupied not by the person they had followed, but by a group of abandoned animals, 2 skinny cats, a limping dog, and a rabbit with a missing ear. The animals cowered as Ethan and Atlas approached, their eyes wide with fear. All except for one, a small, scruffy terrier that barked defiantly, positioning itself between Ethan and the other animals. "It's okay," Ethan said softly, kneeling down to appear less threatening. "We're not here to hurt you." Atlas, usually alert and protective around unfamiliar animals, surprised Ethan by sitting down calmly. The German Shepherd's behavior seemed to reassure the other animals, and gradually the terrier's barking subsided. As Ethan surveyed the makeshift shelter, he noticed food bowls and blankets. Someone had been caring for these abandoned animals, creating a sanctuary for them in this forgotten place. Was it the person they had followed? The sound of footsteps interrupted Ethan's thoughts. Atlas stood up, alert, but not aggressive. A young woman emerged from the shadows, carrying a bag that Ethan assumed contained food for the animals. She stopped abruptly when she saw Ethan and Atlas, her body tense and ready to flee. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Ethan said quickly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. We were just exploring and found this place. The woman hesitated, her gaze shifting between Ethan and the animals. She appeared to be about Ethan's age, with dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail and eyes that held a mixture of wariness and determination. "My name is Ethan and this is Atlas," he continued, trying to break the tension. "We live in Riverside." The woman regarded Ethan with cautious eyes, her hand clutching the bag of supplies. "I'm Olivia," she finally said, her voice soft but firm. "And you shouldn't be here. It's not safe after dark." Ethan nodded, understanding her concern. The abandoned warehouse district had a reputation for being dangerous at night. "We were heading back home," he explained. "Atlas got curious, and we followed you." Olivia's expression softened slightly as she looked at Atlas, who sat obediently by Ethan's side. "Your dog is beautiful," she said, a hint of admiration in her voice. "German Shepherds are incredibly loyal." "He's the best friend I've ever had," Ethan admitted, reaching down to scratch Atlas behind the ears. "How long have you been taking care of these animals?" Olivia moved toward the makeshift shelter, and the animals stirred with excitement at her presence. "About 6 months now," she said, opening her bag to reveal cans of pet food and a few medical supplies. "I work at the veterinary clinic on Maple Street. These are the ones no one wants, the ones people abandon when they leave the city." Ethan watched as she methodically fed each animal, checking them for any new injuries or signs of illness. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, and her voice remained gentle as she spoke to each creature. There was something captivating about her dedication, a kind of quiet strength that drew Ethan in. "I could help," he found himself saying. "I mean, if you need anything, food, supplies, or just an extra pair of hands." Olivia looked up, surprise evident in her expression. "Most people don't care about strays," she said, a note of skepticism in her voice. "They see them as pests, not living beings, deserving of compassion." "I'm not most people," Ethan replied, meeting her gaze. "And neither is Atlas. We know what it's like to feel alone in this city." A small smile tugged at the corner of Olivia's mouth, the first sign of warmth she had shown. "Come back tomorrow evening if you're serious," she said. "I could use help repairing some of the shelter before winter really sets in." Ethan nodded, feeling a sense of purpose that had been absent from his life for too long. "We'll be here," he promised, giving Atlas a gentle tug on the leash to indicate it was time to leave. As they made their way back through the snow-covered streets, Ethan's mind was filled with thoughts of Olivia and the abandoned animals. In a city where apathy seemed to be the prevailing emotion, her compassion stood out like a beacon of light in the darkness. The next day at the mechanic shop, Ethan worked with renewed energy. Mr. Jenkins noticed the change in his demeanor, but didn't comment on it, simply raising an eyebrow when Ethan asked to leave work a bit early. "Got somewhere important to be?" the older man asked, wiping his greasy hands on a rag. "Just helping a friend," Ethan replied, already changing out of his work overalls. Mr. Jenkins nodded, a knowing smile on his weathered face. "That's good. You spend too much time alone, kid. You and that dog of yours." Ethan gathered Atlas from his usual spot in the corner of the garage, and they set off toward the warehouse district. On the way, Ethan stopped at a pet supply store and spent a portion of his meager savings on dog food, cat food, and a few sturdy blankets. The cashier looked at him curiously as she rang up his purchases. "Got a lot of pets?" she asked conversationally. "Just helping out," Ethan replied, not wanting to explain the situation. Detroit had strict regulations about unauthorized animal shelters, and he didn't want to create problems for Olivia. When they arrived at the warehouse, Ethan found Olivia, already there, reinforcing the makeshift shelter with pieces of plywood and tarps. She looked up as they approached, surprise and pleasure mingling in her expression. "You actually came," she said, standing up and brushing dust from her jeans. "I said I would," Ethan replied, setting down the bags of supplies he had brought. "Atlas and I keep our promises." Olivia's gaze softened as she looked at the supplies. "Thank you," she said simply, but her voice carried the weight of genuine gratitude. They worked together for several hours, reinforcing the shelter to protect against the winter weather. Ethan discovered that Olivia had been living in Detroit her entire life. Her parents had moved to Florida 2 years ago, seeking warmth and economic stability, but Olivia had stayed behind to finish her veterinary assistant program. "I couldn't leave them," she explained, gesturing to the animals that had gathered around them as they worked. No one else was going to take care of them. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the broken windows of the warehouse, Ethan and Olivia sat on a makeshift bench, sharing a thermos of hot coffee that Olivia had brought. Atlas lay at their feet, content in the company of the other animals that had gradually accepted his presence. "Why do you stay in Detroit?" Olivia asked, her breath forming small clouds in the cold air. "Most young people leave as soon as they can." Ethan stared out at the deteriorating cityscape visible through the warehouse windows. The question was one he had asked himself many times. "This is home," he said finally. "For all its flaws, it's the only place I know. And I guess I've always hoped that things would get better, that the city would find its way back." Olivia nodded, understanding in her eyes. "That's why I stay too," she admitted. "That and these guys need me." She gestured to the animals around them. "The clinic where I work does what it can, but resources are limited. The strays are always the last priority." Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden commotion outside. Atlas was immediately alert, rising to his feet with ears perked up. The other animals, too, seemed disturbed, retreating to the safety of their shelter. "Stay here," Ethan said, standing up and moving cautiously toward one of the broken windows to investigate the source of the noise. What he saw made his blood run cold. A group of young men were gathered outside, and they had cornered a stray dog, a large, dark German shepherd that looked remarkably similar to Atlas. The men carried sticks and metal pipes, their intentions clearly malicious. "Olivia," Ethan called urgently, "there's a dog out there in trouble." Olivia was beside him in an instant, her face paling at the scene below. "Those are the Miller brothers, and their friends," she said, her voice tight with anger. "They've been terrorizing the strays for months. I've reported them to the police, but nothing ever happens." Without hesitation, Ethan headed for the exit, Atlas following closely behind. Olivia grabbed his arm, her eyes wide with concern. "Be careful," she warned. "They're dangerous." Ethan nodded, his jaw set with determination. He couldn't stand by and watch an innocent animal be harmed. As he and Atlas emerged from the warehouse, the group of young men turned to face them, momentarily distracted from their target. "Well, look who it is," the tallest of the group sneered, recognizing Ethan from the neighborhood. The loner and his mutt. Ethan stood his ground, Atlas at his side, both of them creating a barrier between the men and the frightened stray. "Leave the dog alone," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The leader of the group, Jake Miller, stepped forward, twirling a metal pipe in his hand. "Or what?" he challenged. "You gonna call the cops? They don't care about this part of town, and they sure as hell don't care about some stray dog." Ethan knew Jake was right. The police rarely responded to calls from this area, especially not for something they would consider trivial, but he couldn't back down now. "Just walk away," Ethan said, maintaining eye contact with Jake. "This doesn't have to escalate." Jake laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the empty street. "Always the peacemaker, aren't you, Miller? That's why you're alone. No backbone." The insult stung, but Ethan remained focused on the situation at hand. The stray dog was still cornered, its body tense with fear. Atlas seemed to sense Ethan's resolve, standing tall beside him, a low growl rumbling in his chest. What happened? Next occurred in a blur of motion. Jake lunged forward with the pipe, aiming not at Ethan but at Atlas. Ethan reacted instinctively, pushing Atlas out of the way and taking the blow on his arm. The pain was immediate and intense, but adrenaline kept him on his feet. Atlas, protective of his owner, barked fiercely, causing Jake to step back. The other men in the group seemed uncertain, not having expected actual resistance. The standoff continued for what felt like an eternity, with Jake and his friends on one side and Ethan and Atlas on the other. The injured stray remained huddled against the wall, watching the confrontation with wary eyes. "You're outnumbered, Miller," Jake said, his confidence returning as he gestured to his friends. "Walk away now, and we might forget this happened." Ethan stood his ground, his injured arm throbbing with pain. "I'm not leaving the dog," he said firmly. The tension was broken by the sound of approaching footsteps. Olivia emerged from the shadows, accompanied by 2 police officers. The sight of law enforcement, rare as it was in this part of town, caused Jake and his friends to retreat. "This isn't over," Jake called over his shoulder as they disappeared into the labyrinth of abandoned buildings. Ethan exhaled, the adrenaline that had been sustaining him beginning to ebb away. He turned to the cornered German shepherd, approaching slowly with his hand extended. "It's okay," he said softly. "You're safe now." The dog, though still cautious, allowed Ethan to come closer. Its dark fur was matted, and there was a fresh wound on its side where one of the men had struck it. Despite its injuries, there was a dignity in the dog's bearing, a resilience that reminded Ethan of Atlas. "Thank you for calling the police," Ethan said to Olivia as she approached, the officers having departed after taking brief statements. "I didn't," Olivia replied, confusion evident in her voice. "They just appeared, said they received an anonymous tip about animal abuse in the area." Ethan frowned, looking around the deserted street. Who would have called the police? And why would they have responded so quickly to a call about a stray dog when they typically ignored more serious reports from this neighborhood? The injured German shepherd had allowed Ethan to place a gentle hand on its head, a tentative trust forming between them. Atlas, usually territorial around other dogs, seemed unusually accepting of the newcomer. "We need to get him to the clinic," Olivia said, examining the dog's wounds with practiced eyes. "The cut isn't deep, but it could get infected." Together, they managed to guide the reluctant stray back to the warehouse where Olivia had parked her old sedan. The dog was wary of the vehicle, but eventually allowed them to help it into the back seat, where Atlas sat protectively beside. "Your arm needs attention too," Olivia noted, glancing at Ethan's injury as she started the car. Ethan shrugged, trying to ignore the pain. "It's just a bruise. The dog is more important." The veterinary clinic on Maple Street was closed for the day, but Olivia had keys. She led them through the back entrance, flipping on lights as they moved through the quiet building. The injured German shepherd followed cautiously, staying close to Atlas as if drawing strength from the other dog's calm presence. In the examination room, Olivia worked efficiently, cleaning and treating the stray's wounds, while Ethan held him steady. The dog remained surprisingly calm under her care, as if understanding that she was trying to help. "He's been through a lot," Olivia observed, applying an antibiotic ointment to the cut. "But he's strong. No signs of serious illness, just malnourishment and these recent injuries." "Does he have a name?" Ethan asked, stroking the dog's head gently. Olivia shook her head. "No collar, no microchip that I can detect. He's probably been on his own for a while." As she finished treating the dog, Olivia turned her attention to Ethan's arm, insisting on examining it despite his protests. The skin was bruised and swollen where Jake's pipe had struck, but nothing appeared to be broken. "You were lucky," she said, applying a cold compress to reduce the swelling. And brave, standing up to those guys like that. Ethan felt warmth spreading through him at her words, a feeling that had nothing to do with physical pain. I couldn't just watch them hurt an innocent animal, he said simply. After Olivia had tended to both the stray and Ethan, they faced the question of what to do next. The clinic couldn't keep the dog. They were already at capacity with other rescued animals. The warehouse shelter was an option, but Ethan was concerned about the dog's safety, especially if Jake and his friends returned seeking revenge. He could stay with me and Atlas, Ethan suggested, looking down at the two German shepherds. Atlas had maintained a protective stance near the stray throughout the entire ordeal, a behavior Ethan had never witnessed before. Olivia looked skeptical. Are you sure? Taking in a stray is a big responsibility, especially one that might have behavioral issues from living on the streets. Ethan nodded, his decision made. I'm sure. Atlas and I have room, and it seems like they've already bonded. And so, after filling out some basic paperwork for Olivia's records, Ethan found himself walking home with not one, but two German shepherds. The stray, whom Ethan had started calling Shadow due to his dark coat and quiet nature, stayed close to Atlas, following his lead. The small apartment seemed even smaller with the addition of another large dog, but Ethan didn't mind. He set up a makeshift bed for Shadow in the living room, though he suspected the dog might end up sharing Atlas's bed instead, given how they had stayed close to each other. "Welcome home, Shadow," Ethan said, offering the new dog a bowl of food that he eagerly accepted. That night, as snow fell gently outside the window, Ethan lay awake, thinking about the day's events. Something had shifted within him. The encounter with Jake and his friends had awakened a sense of purpose that had been dormant for too long. He couldn't change the entire city, but perhaps he could make a difference for a few forgotten souls, both human and animal. With that thought in mind, Ethan finally drifted off to sleep, unaware that the most extraordinary part of his journey was yet to come. The next morning brought unexpected news. Ethan awoke to find both dogs sitting by his bed, their eyes focused intently on him. Atlas's usual morning greeting of a gentle nudge was accompanied by Shadow's tentative approach, the new dog still cautious but clearly following Atlas's lead. As Ethan prepared for work, his phone buzzed with a text message from Olivia. "Check the local news, the warehouse." Curious, Ethan turned on the small television in his kitchen, finding the local morning news. The reporter stood in front of the warehouse district, her expression serious as she spoke about an overnight incident. Local authorities responded to reports of suspicious activity in the abandoned Parkside district late last night, the reporter said. They discovered a dogfighting ring operating out of one of the warehouses. Several individuals were arrested, including the notorious Miller brothers, who have been linked to animal cruelty cases in the past. Ethan stared at the screen in disbelief. Jake and his friends had been arrested. The timing seemed too coincidental. He quickly called Olivia, who answered on the first ring. "Did you see it?" she asked, her voice filled with a mixture of surprise and vindication. "Just now," Ethan replied, still processing the information. "How did they get caught? Who reported them?" "I don't know," Olivia admitted. "But it's not just that. The police found evidence linking them to several other crimes in the area. They're facing serious charges." The news was a welcome development, but it raised questions that Ethan couldn't answer. Who had tipped off the police? And why now, after months of the authorities ignoring reports about the Miller brothers' activities? Ethan had to put these questions aside as he prepared for work, making sure both Atlas and Shadow were comfortable before he left. Mr. Jenkins had reluctantly agreed to allow both dogs at the shop, though he had raised his bushy eyebrows at the addition of Shadow to Ethan's family. "Don't make a habit of collecting strays," the older man had warned. though there was no real admonishment in his tone. The day passed uneventfully, with Shadow gradually becoming more comfortable in the garage environment, finding a spot near Atlas in the corner. The injured dog seemed to be healing well, his movements becoming more fluid as the day progressed. After work, Ethan received another text from Olivia. "Meet me at the warehouse. Something strange is happening." Intrigued and slightly concerned, Ethan headed to the warehouse with both dogs. The police had cleared the area, their investigation of the dog-fighting ring complete, but there was a different kind of energy in the air as Ethan approached the building. Olivia was waiting outside, her expression a mixture of awe and confusion. "Look," she said simply, pointing to the entrance of the warehouse. Ethan followed her gaze and froze in surprise. The area around the warehouse, which had been barren and covered in snow just the day before, was now sprouting with small green plants pushing through the frost. Tiny flowers, defying the winter weather, dotted the ground in a circle around the building. "This isn't possible," Ethan murmured, kneeling to touch one of the flowers. It was real, vibrant, and alive despite the freezing temperatures. "How?" Olivia shook her head, at a loss for an explanation. "It gets stranger inside," she said, leading the way into the warehouse. The interior of the building had undergone an even more dramatic transformation. The makeshift animal shelter that they had reinforced was now surrounded by an inexplicable growth of plants. Vines climbed the walls, and patches of grass had sprouted from the concrete floor. The animals that Olivia had been caring for seemed unusually calm and content, lounging in the new greenery as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "When did this happen?" Ethan asked, taking in the surreal scene. "Overnight," Olivia replied, her voice hushed with wonder. "I came to feed them this morning, and it was like this. The police investigators didn't mention anything unusual, so it must have happened after they left." Atlas and Shadow moved through the transformed space with curious sniffs, seemingly unperturbed by the inexplicable changes. The other animals greeted them warmly, especially Shadow, who received gentle nudges and nuzzles from the formerly abandoned cats and dogs. As Ethan and Olivia explored the transformed warehouse, they struggled to make sense of what they were seeing. The concrete floor, once cold and unforgiving, now supported patches of soft grass. Delicate vines climbed the metal support beams, their tendrils reaching toward the broken skylights as if seeking the winter sun. Most remarkably, small flowers bloomed in vibrant clusters, their colors a stark contrast to the gray and brown tones that had previously dominated the space. "This defies every law of nature I know," Olivia whispered, kneeling to examine one of the flowers. "Plants don't grow overnight, especially not in winter, and certainly not through concrete." Ethan nodded, equally perplexed. "And look at the animals," he said, gesturing to the cats, dogs, and rabbits that were lounging contentedly amidst the greenery. "They're different somehow, calmer, healthier." It was true. The formerly skittish cats now groomed themselves leisurely in patches of sunlight. The limping dog that Olivia had been treating moved with newfound ease, its gait almost normal. Even the rabbit with the missing ear seemed more vibrant, its fur glossier than before. Atlas and Shadow were equally affected by the strange environment. They moved through the space with a sense of purpose, stopping to interact with each of the other animals in turn. It was as if they were checking on them, ensuring their well-being. "It's like they're communicating," Olivia observed, watching the interactions with fascination. Not just normal animal behavior, but something deeper. Before Ethan could respond, a new sound caught their attention. A soft, human cry coming from a corner of the warehouse they hadn't yet explored. Atlas and Shadow were immediately alert, moving toward the sound with cautious steps. Ethan and Olivia followed, exchanging concerned glances. The sound grew louder as they approached a section of the warehouse that had once been an office area. The door was partially open, and light spilled from inside, a warm glow that seemed out of place in the abandoned building. With Atlas and Shadow at his side, Ethan pushed the door open fully, revealing a sight that took his breath away. The former office had been transformed into a nursery of sorts. Wildflowers grew from every crack in the floor, climbing the walls and creating a canopy of color above. In the center of this natural sanctuary, nestled in what appeared to be a cradle of woven vines and soft moss, was a baby. The infant couldn't have been more than a few months old, with a tuft of dark hair and wide, curious eyes. It lay in the makeshift cradle, cooing softly, seemingly unperturbed by its unusual surroundings. "Oh my God," Olivia gasped, rushing forward to check on the baby. "How did a baby get here?" Ethan followed more cautiously, his mind racing with possibilities, none of which seemed plausible. "Is it okay?" he asked, as Olivia gently lifted the infant from its nest of vegetation. Olivia examined the baby with the same careful attention she gave to the animals in her care. "He seems perfectly healthy," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "No signs of distress, normal temperature, responsive. But how?" The question hung in the air, unanswerable. No one had entered or left the warehouse since they had been there the previous day. The police had conducted a thorough search during their investigation of the dogfighting ring. It seemed impossible that a baby could have been placed there without anyone noticing. Even more bewildering was the baby's condition. Despite being in an abandoned warehouse in the middle of winter with no apparent source of food or care, the infant appeared well-nourished and content. As Olivia cradled the baby, Atlas and Shadow approached, their demeanor gentle and protective. The baby reached out with tiny hands, gurgling happily at the sight of the dogs. When Shadow moved closer, the baby's fingers brushed against the dog's fur, right over the wound that Olivia had treated the day before. What happened next defied explanation. Where the baby's hand touched Shadow's wound, a soft glow emanated, brief but unmistakable. When the light faded, the wound was gone, leaving behind healthy fur and skin as if no injury had ever occurred. Ethan and Olivia stared in disbelief. "Did you see that?" Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible. Olivia nodded, her face pale with shock. "The wound, it's healed completely." The baby gurgled again, seemingly pleased with the outcome. Atlas moved forward, nuzzling the infant, gently, followed by Shadow, who seemed equally drawn to the child. "We need to call someone," Olivia said, her practical nature reasserting itself despite the inexplicable events unfolding around them. "Child services, the police. We can't just find an abandoned baby and not report it." Ethan knew she was right, but something held him back. The baby, the miraculous healing, the transformed warehouse, none of it made sense within the framework of normal reality. Would anyone believe them if they tried to explain what they had witnessed? "Let's think about this," he said, moving closer to examine the baby. The infant looked up at him with eyes that seemed impossibly wise for one so young. "There's something special happening here, something we don't understand. If we call the authorities, they'll take him away, put him in the system. And all of this," he gestured to the transformed space around them, "will be dismissed or destroyed." Olivia bit her lip, clearly torn between her duty to report an abandoned child and her instinct that something profound and important was occurring. "What are you suggesting, that we keep a baby? That's kidnapping, Ethan." "Not kidnapping," Ethan clarified quickly, "just giving ourselves time to understand what's happening before we involve people who might not have the baby's best interests at heart." The baby chose that moment to yawn, his tiny face scrunching up in a way that melted both their hearts. Atlas and Shadow remained close, their protective stance unwavering. One night, Olivia conceded reluctantly. We'll keep him here for one night while we figure out what to do, but we'll need supplies, diapers, formula, blankets. Ethan nodded, relieved that she was willing to give them time to process the situation. I'll go get everything. Can you stay with him? Olivia agreed, already settling onto a patch of soft grass with the baby in her arms. Atlas stayed with her, while Shadow accompanied Ethan back to his car. As Ethan drove to the nearest store, his mind was a whirlwind of questions. Who was this baby? How had he appeared in the warehouse? And most importantly, what was the source of his apparent ability to heal and transform? When Ethan returned with bags of baby supplies, he found Olivia singing softly to the infant, who was drifting off to sleep in her arms. The scene was so peaceful, so at odds with the abandoned warehouse setting that Ethan paused in the doorway, reluctant to disturb them. He has a name, Olivia said quietly, looking up as Ethan approached. Noah. It was embroidered on the blanket he was wrapped in. I found it when I was making him more comfortable. Noah, Ethan repeated, setting down the supplies and sitting beside her. It suits him. They spent the night taking turns caring for baby Noah, warming bottles of formula on a small camping stove that Ethan had brought from his apartment and changing diapers with unpracticed hands. Through it all, Atlas and Shadow remained vigilant, their attention focused on the baby as if they had appointed themselves his guardians. As dawn broke, sending weak winter sunlight through the skylights, Ethan and Olivia faced the decision they had postponed the night before. We have to call someone, Olivia said, though her voice lacked conviction. We can't keep him ourselves. Ethan looked at Noah, who was awake and alert in Olivia's arms, his tiny fingers reaching for a strand of her hair. What if we could, he found himself saying. Not forever, but until we understand what's happening here. Olivia frowned. What are you talking about? This place, Ethan gestured to the transformed warehouse. It's become something special, something healing. The animals are thriving, plants are growing in winter, and Noah, whatever his gift is, it seems connected to this space. What if we were meant to find him? What if we're supposed to protect him until we understand why he's here? It was a wild suggestion, born of exhaustion and the lingering awe of what they had witnessed. Yet, as Ethan spoke, he felt the rightness of it settling in his bones. Atlas and Shadow seemed to agree, moving closer to Noah, their protective instincts evident in every line of their bodies. Olivia was silent for a long moment, her gaze moving from Noah to the transformed space around them. People would think, we're crazy, she said finally, or worse, they'd try to exploit him if they saw what he can do. Then we keep it a secret, Ethan replied. We turn this place into a legitimate animal sanctuary. We get the proper permits, make it official, and Noah becomes part of that story, a child we're caring for while we search for his family. It was a thin cover story, one that would raise questions and invite scrutiny. But as they discussed the details, refining the plan and addressing potential problems, a sense of purpose began to crystallize between them. They would protect Noah and the sanctuary he had somehow created, giving him time to grow and understand his unique abilities in a safe environment. The decision made, they spent the day transforming their makeshift operation into something more permanent. Ethan used his savings to purchase more supplies for both the animals and Noah. Olivia contacted a lawyer friend who could help with the paperwork required to establish a legitimate animal sanctuary. They cleaned and organized the space, creating separate areas for different types of animals and setting up a proper living area for themselves and Noah. Word of their efforts spread quickly through the neighborhood. The transformation of the abandoned warehouse did not go unnoticed, and soon curious neighbors began to stop by, offering help, donations, and even more animals in need of care. Mr. Jenkins, upon hearing of Ethan's new venture, surprised him by offering to become a part-time handyman for the sanctuary. "That place needs someone who knows how to fix things," the older man said gruffly, though Ethan suspected his interest had more to do with the animals and baby Noah than with the building itself. As days turned into weeks, the sanctuary began to take shape. The initial burst of inexplicable growth had stabilized, but the plants continued to thrive despite the winter weather. The animals, too, maintained their improved health and demeanor, creating a harmonious community unlike anything Ethan or Olivia had ever experienced. Noah grew quickly, his development seemingly accelerated compared to other infants his age. By what they estimated was his 6th month, he was already sitting up unassisted, his curious eyes taking in everything around him. His connection with Atlas and Shadow remained strong, the two German shepherds rarely leaving his side. 5 years had passed since that fateful winter night when Ethan and Olivia had discovered baby Noah in the transformed warehouse. What had begun as a desperate decision to protect a mysterious child had evolved into something neither of them could have imagined. The Parkside Animal Sanctuary, as they had named it, had become a cornerstone of the community's revitalization. The once abandoned warehouse district had gradually transformed into a vibrant center for animal welfare and community engagement. Adjacent buildings had been renovated and repurposed, housing veterinary services, educational programs, and even a small cafe that helped fund their operations. Ethan and Olivia had married 3 years earlier, a development that surprised neither them nor anyone who knew them. Their shared mission had forged a bond that went beyond romance. They were united by a purpose that gave meaning to each day. Noah, now a lively 5-year-old with an unruly mop of dark hair and eyes that sparkled with intelligence, had become the heart of their unconventional family. His true origins remained a mystery, despite their discreet efforts to find any record of a missing infant around the time they had found him. It was as if he had simply appeared, bringing with him the inexplicable energy that had transformed not just the warehouse, but their lives and gradually the surrounding neighborhood. On a crisp autumn morning, Ethan stood at the entrance to the sanctuary, watching as Noah played in the central courtyard with Atlas and Shadow. The two German shepherds, now older but still vital, had remained Noah's constant companions and protectors. Atlas's muzzle had begun to show signs of gray, but his loyalty and protective nature had only deepened with age. Shadow, fully recovered from his former injuries, had developed into a gentle giant, particularly patient with the younger animals that came into their care. "Penny for your thoughts," Olivia said, joining Ethan at the entrance, a cup of steaming coffee in each hand. "Just thinking about how far we've come," Ethan replied. "Remember when this place was just a shell with a few strays and one mysterious baby?" Their reflective moment was interrupted by the arrival of a sleek black car at the sanctuary's entrance. A middle-aged woman with keen eyes stepped out, introducing herself as Dr. Eleanor Reed from the Thompson Foundation, one of the largest philanthropic organizations in the country. As they guided Dr. Reed through the sanctuary, explaining their programs and introducing her to the staff and volunteers, Ethan kept one eye on Noah, who was sitting in a sunny corner of the courtyard, reading a book to Shadow and a circle of smaller animals that had gathered around him. The scene was picturesque, but also telling. The unusual harmony between species, the attentive posture of the animals, the subtle glow that sometimes surrounded Noah when he was particularly content. "Your son has quite a way with animals," Dr. Reed remarked as they completed their tour. "He's grown up here," Olivia explained, the practiced response coming easily. "Animals have been part of his life from the beginning. Dr. Reed nodded, but her expression suggested she wasn't entirely satisfied with the explanation. "The results you've achieved here are remarkable," she said, gesturing to the recovery statistics displayed on a board in the office. "The Thompson Foundation is launching a new initiative focused on innovative approaches to animal welfare and environmental restoration. We would like to offer the Parkside Animal Sanctuary a substantial grant to expand your operations." The offer was unexpected and incredibly timely. Despite their success, the sanctuary's finances were always stretched thin, with more animals needing help than they had resources to properly care for. "That's very generous," Olivia said cautiously. "May I ask what prompted your interest in our particular sanctuary? There are many doing similar work across the country." Dr. Reed's smile was enigmatic. "Let's just say we have a particular interest in unusual success stories, places where something special is happening, even if that something can't be easily explained by conventional means." The implication was clear. The Thompson Foundation suspected there was more to the sanctuary's success than skilled veterinary care and dedicated volunteers. After Dr. Reed had departed, Ethan and Olivia retreated to their small apartment above the sanctuary's main building, the grant proposal sitting between them on the kitchen table like a ticking clock. "They know something," Olivia said, her voice low despite the fact that they were alone. "Or at least, they suspect." Ethan nodded, flipping through the proposal's pages. The grant was substantial, enough to secure the sanctuary's future for years to come. But it also came with conditions: regular site visits from Foundation representatives, detailed reports on their rehabilitation techniques, and participation in a research study on animal-human connections. "Maybe it's time," Olivia said quietly, her hand finding Ethan's across the table. "Maybe we've been protecting Noah's secret for so long that we've lost sight of the potential good that could come from sharing it in the right way with the right people." That evening they sat with Noah in what they called the Heart Garden, the spot where they had first found him, which still bloomed with unusual vigor regardless of the season. "We wanted to talk to you about something important," Ethan began, sitting cross-legged on the grass beside Noah, who was absently stroking Atlas's fur. "About the lady who came today?" Noah asked, his perception as always surprising them. "The one who wants to know about my healing." Olivia exchanged a startled look with Ethan. "How did you know about that?" Noah shrugged, his expression unconcerned. "Shadow told me." "He said she smelled curious, not dangerous." It was moments like these that reminded them just how unique Noah truly was. His connection with the animals went beyond what they could fully comprehend, a silent communication that had developed naturally over the years. After explaining the situation to Noah, they were once again amazed by his wisdom. "I think we should help more animals," he said finally. "But maybe we don't have to tell everybody everything right away. Maybe we can start small, like when I was learning to ride my bike." The decision made, they spent the evening drafting a response to the Thompson Foundation, accepting the grant, but proposing modifications to the research component that would protect Noah's privacy, while still allowing for meaningful study of the sanctuary's unique rehabilitation success. The 6 months that followed their acceptance of the Thompson Foundation grant were a whirlwind of activity and careful navigation. Dr. Reed and her team became regular visitors to the sanctuary, documenting the rehabilitation process and collecting data on recovery rates and techniques. They were clearly fascinated by what they observed, but maintained a professional respect for the boundaries that Ethan and Olivia had established. Noah, true to his nature, approached the new arrangement with a child's adaptability. He continued his healing work with the animals, but did so with a new awareness of when to allow others to observe and when to keep his more dramatic abilities private. On the morning of Noah's 6th birthday, Ethan awoke early, his mind already racing with preparations for the small celebration they had planned. As he passed Noah's room, he was surprised to find the door open and the bed empty. Atlas and Shadow were missing as well, an unusual occurrence, as the dogs rarely left Noah's side. He found them in the heart garden, Noah, Atlas and Shadow, sitting in a circle of light that seemed too bright for the overcast morning. Noah's hands were placed gently on Atlas's grey muzzle, and the soft glow that typically accompanied his healing was intensified, creating a halo of light around both boy and dog. As the glow gradually faded, Noah sat back on his heels, his small face serious but satisfied. Atlas shook himself as if waking from a deep sleep and then bounded toward Ethan with an energy that had been absent for months. "Dad!" Noah called, noticing Ethan's presence. "I gave Atlas a birthday present. He's not hurting anymore." Ethan knelt to greet Atlas, who nearly knocked him over with his enthusiastic welcome. The dog's eyes were clear and bright, his movements fluid and energetic, reminiscent of his younger days. It was a more comprehensive healing than Noah typically performed, one that seemed to have addressed not just a specific injury, but the general decline of age. "That's quite a gift," Ethan said, moving to embrace his son. "Atlas looks very happy about it." Noah nodded, his expression reflecting a wisdom beyond his years. "He needed to be strong again," he said simply. "For what's coming?" The cryptic statement sent a chill through Ethan. "What do you mean, buddy? What's coming?" Noah shrugged, already distracted by Shadow, who was nudging him playfully. "I don't know exactly, just that there's going to be a change, and we all need to be ready." The birthday party was a joyful affair, with the sanctuary staff and their closest supporters gathering to celebrate Noah and the community they had built together. Dr. Reed attended as well, bringing a gift for Noah, a professionally bound book of photographs documenting the sanctuary's transformation over the years. As the celebration wound down and their guests departed, Ethan, Olivia, and Noah found themselves once again in the Heart Garden, accompanied by Atlas and Shadow. The evening was mild for early autumn, with stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "Noah," Olivia said carefully, "this morning you told your dad that something was coming, that we needed to be ready. Can you tell us more about that?" Noah looked up at the stars, his young face illuminated by the garden's soft glow. "I've been having dreams," he admitted, "about other places like this one, other people who can do special things. They're looking for us, for the sanctuary. I think they want to help." Ethan and Olivia exchanged glances, a mixture of hope and apprehension passing between them. If Noah was right, if there were others with gifts similar to his, it could change everything. Their understanding of his origins, the potential impact of his abilities, the future of the sanctuary itself. "Whatever comes," Ethan said, drawing both Noah and Olivia into an embrace, "we'll face it together, as a family." Atlas and Shadow moved closer, forming a protective circle around the humans they had chosen as their own. In the gentle night air, surrounded by the thriving garden that had once been cold concrete, the promise felt like more than just words. And it felt like a covenant, sealed by the bond they had forged through years of shared purpose and unconditional love. As they walked back to their apartment above the sanctuary, the soft lights of Detroit's skyline visible in the distance, Ethan reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From a city devastated by economic collapse and human indifference, they had carved out a space of healing and hope. What had begun as a desperate act to protect one mysterious child had blossomed into a mission that touched countless lives, both human and animal. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever new chapters would be written in the blank pages of their story, Ethan knew that the foundation they had built, not just the physical sanctuary, but the community of compassion it represented, would endure. Like the plants that had pushed through concrete on that first miraculous night, their legacy of love and healing would continue to grow, spreading outward from the heart garden to touch a world in desperate need of renewal. As Noah drifted off to sleep that night, with Atlas and Shadow maintaining their vigilant watch, Ethan and Olivia stood hand in hand at the window, gazing out at the sanctuary that had become their life's work. The first stars of evening painted the sky with pinpricks of light, a reminder that even in darkness, hope remained. In the garden below, a new flower bloomed, its petals unfurling in the moonlight, a silent affirmation of life's persistent beauty and the endless possibility of renewal. Dear listeners, we hope that Ethan, Noah, and Olivia's journey through hardship to hope has touched your hearts. Their story reminds us that even in our darkest moments, compassion and love can transform our world in ways we never imagined possible. To continue experiencing powerful narratives like this one, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it by clicking on the link to your left. If this story moved you, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day, we bring you unique stories that explore the depth and complexity of life's most meaningful connections. And we'd love to hear from you. What moments in Ethan and Noah's journey resonated with you most? What animals have changed your life? Share your thoughts in the comments below and join our community of storytellers and dreamers who believe in the power of compassion to heal our world.